Hello and welcome to I Can't Believe It's Not the Mouse, the podcast all about animation not made by the mouse. I'm your host, Octaviano Macias. You know, Hollywood has tried and tried with this franchise. There's no reason for you guys to keep on doing it. I know why you're doing it because it's a moneymaker, but this is like your fourth attempt at trying to do it, and I don't know what you guys keep on doing with this franchise. It's not even like it's something that I truly love. It's something that, I remember watching as a kid, but I'm like, there's gotta be something else you can do. Like if you're gonna keep on doing this franchise, look into the well, try to do something that actually feels a lot more faithful to it than whatever you're currently doing. I'm gonna be talking about the recent Smurfs movie. Kind of. I will also be talking about the Smurfs movies as a whole, but mainly I'm gonna be focusing on this recent movie. Before we get started, I just want to say, if you're listening to this on YouTube, go ahead and give it a like, subscribe to the channel, feel free to comment, and ring the bell for notifications. Also, if you're on Spotify or just any other podcast site, follow this show on those platforms. So, here's the thing. I was not planning to do a bunch of recent movies. I know I've only been doing recent movies for the recent episodes. That's just because I've been busy with a lot of things. Practically a year end, I'm still working on something. But regardless of that, I was not planning to do nothing but recent movies. But when I saw that the new Smurfs movie had gotten into Paramount Plus, I was like, you know what? I gotta see this train wreck. The trailers are so awful. People said it was a bad movie. Let me see how bad it is. Because I feel like a lot of times people overreact with bad adaptations of beloved nostalgic franchises. I've done that before too, and I've tried growing past that because I feel like, you know what? Sometimes it's not fair to the material. Just be like, oh, this is like one of the worst things ever made. And then you watch it, it's like, yeah, it's a bad version of the thing you like, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's one of the worst versions. Or one of the worst things ever made. It just feels like people overreact on these things, and sometimes it doesn't even have to be something that they're nostalgic for. Sometimes, like with the Emoji Movie, which is something that I talked about way back at the start of the show, I just feel like it's one of those things where it's like, there's really nothing inherently that bad about it. It's not good, but it isn't something where I'm like, yeah, this is like one of the worst things ever made. No, you guys are just taking something that you get annoyed of, whether it's because in that case it was like a cringy subject of like, hey, we're making a movie about emojis, or in this case, it's like, it's a bad adaptation of a nostalgic property. But yeah, seeing it as all that, I was like, okay, let me see how bad it is. I know it's going to be bad just because the trailers look bad. But then again, I could be surprised. But yeah, no, it's going to be bad. And so I finally saw it, and yeah, it was bad. It's something that I will say was the worst of the Smurfs movies. But if I'm completely honest, I don't think it's... I don't think it's, well, okay, look, to be fair, it is the worst movie I've seen all year, but that's only because I haven't seen that much movies. I've seen quite a few dozen or so, not enough to where I can make that definitive judgment, like, oh yeah, this is like one of the worst movies ever made. It's like, nah, it's just kind of forgettable at the most part. It's something where I'm like, I really disliked it as an adaptation of the Smurfs. As a movie on its own, it's still really bad, but it's something that I'm like, the worst thing it does is be generic. Basically, the whole movie is just, hey, look, here's this Smurf called No Name. He doesn't believe in himself because he doesn't have a thing, like all the other Smurfs have a thing. Eventually, he finds out that he has magical power, so he's like a magic Smurf, but he's still called No Name until the very end, and when he earns the title because, he screws up, Papa Smurf gets kidnapped. Smurfette is like the second lead in this. She's pretty much one that's trying to convince No Name that he could be something special while sharing her backstory. There's a whole lot of multiverse stuff. That's the whole movie. And from what I will say, I don't think that the premise itself was necessarily bad for a Smurfs movie. Like the whole idea of like, okay, there's a new Smurf that doesn't have an identity, trying to figure out their identity, and then they have to rescue Papa Smurf. That part, I'm like, okay, this is a fairly decent idea. And the villain being someone who wants to basically get in the higher leagues of like evil wizards. Again, not a bad premise, but the way they went about it is where it really gets bad. One, adding in the multiverse, no reason it had to be there. Even, considering, just having that, it's like, okay, you don't explore the multiverse enough to really justify having the multiverse. And even though the Smurfs eventually go into the real world, which we've done that before, no real point to doing that because the Smurfs never really interact with real people this time. So it's like, this could have been them going into a different village and it still would have been the same thing. Like, you could have kept that all fantasy based and it would have benefited the movie greatly. Like, it probably still wouldn't have been good, but it at least would have felt closer to what the Smurfs are. Instead, you get this weird hodgepodge of, oh, look, now the Smurfs are in the real world, so they're interacting with real things, except not really. And the villain of the movie has a pretty normal assistant. Probably the part that I dislike the most of this movie is that the voice actor they got for the villain, who also voices Gargamel, because Gargamel is not the main villain in this one. Not a bad choice for the voice. It's actually a pretty good voice role. The problem is that they made Gargamel's brother into the main villain, and essentially it's like you're giving Gargamel's role to this other character that we've never met before. And, I'm fine with giving Gargamel, family members, but I feel like the roles should have been reversed. Gargamel being the one that's trying to get with the strong wizards by capturing the Smurfs, or capturing their book, but whatever. This is the movie they made. I mean, again, it's really stupid because Gargamel is made out to be this complete idiot and even has this whole moment where he decides to help the Smurfs just to get back at his brother. And I'm like, this should have been the other way around. Like, why take the iconic villain and change it around? Like, I'm not against, creating new villains. Like, for example, I'm a big fan of, like, the Mario RPG games, like Mario and Luigi, Mario RPG, all that stuff. And in those games, they still make sure to keep Bowser a threat to the Mushroom Kingdom. Like, yeah, they add like a goofy side to it, and they often sideline him to make someone else the main villain, but they at least acknowledge, like, look, Bowser is still a threat. It's just that this is a bigger threat. So it's perfectly fine in that regard. In this one, it's like, no, you just made Gargamel into essentially the brother from A Bug's Life, where he's like, yeah, he's on the villain side, but he's kind of an idiot and there's nothing really competent about him. I just don't get that choice. Regardless of this, they go on this whole adventure, and you can see how this movie kept its budget cheap. It's like, okay, we don't have to animate the backgrounds if we have the Smurfs just interacting with live settings, so we could just insert them, and since they're not really interacting with real people or whatever, we can, again, just insert them into a picture of a live shot, and that'll be fine. On top of that, the entire Smurf village is supposed to go on this rescue mission for Papa Smurf, but at any given time, you only ever see anywhere between a dozen to a half dozen. So it's not even a whole lot that you're seeing on screen at one time. And I get it, you're like, look, there was going to be no way to keep it consistent. We only want to focus on select Smurfs for like jokes or whatever. But at the same time, I'm just like, it just feels kind of weird that you'll have in one shot, it's like, okay, here's Vanity Smurf coming in, making a joke. And then in the next shot, Vanity Smurf is gone. She's somewhere else, and instead we have Grumpy Smurf or whatever. It's like, it makes it confusing because it's like, wait, where's this Smurf? What happened to that Smurf? And it does pop in and out. You don't see them right there. Like, like it would have been cool if you were gonna make a whole group of them go at it. Like, okay, look, this is how we get about or go around it. We'll just have them interacting with random things. I don't know if that would have been any good, but at the very least, it would have been something to keep track of. Or if you wanted to keep it a small group, it should have just been a small group of Smurfs. I mean, the other movies did that. Of all the things that I didn't want them to repeat for this one, that was like the one thing where I'm like, yeah, I understand if you repeat that aspect, which I'll talk about the repeating aspects in a bit. So for the most part, yeah, that's the whole movie. There's some weird out of place musical numbers, stuff that I'm like, okay, they're, kids movies are still doing this kind of stuff. I thought they were kind of done, like the dance party stuff. Just a whole lot of nonsense. I mean, as it is one of the weirder aspects of the movie, think about it, going back with the whole Smurfs thing. If you paid attention to when I say Vanity Smurf, you might have heard that I said she, and that's because in this version, they do make some of the Smurfs, female, or at the very least, there's women voicing some of the Smurfs. I'm not really 100% sure. They never make that 100% clear. But I'm going to choose to say that, like, okay, so these are female Smurfs. The weird part about it is just the fact that Vanity Smurf still has this classic design. So on a woman, it's like, okay, so this version of Vanity Smurf is a topless woman. We don't see any of the features, and I'm perfectly fine with that, but I'm just like, this is just kind of a weird choice. Personally, I'm not against, them adding more female characters. It's one of those things like, look, we're tired of the whole joke of like, oh, old Smurfette was the only girl, so it's like, oh, she's a slut or whatever. I get not wanting to do that. My personal feeling on it, though, is that if you're gonna make some of the characters, female, you should have gone all the way and just given them some kind of slight redesign just to better match, that, and that would have been cool. But yeah, I don't know, it's way too generic for me to really hate on it. Like it does have its weird aspects because it is technically a Smurfs plot that would have made sense for a Smurfs movie, but now you're throwing in the multiverse and live action stuff, and whatever, it just becomes nonsense. Again, that makes it more generic. It just wasn't all that good. And it kind of ruins what was actually kind of nice animation, because I think the animation in this feels very much like the drawings, and it's cute. Granted, at times it can feel a little lazy because you kind of get the sense that some of these characters have pre-installed animations that they kind of loop around, like especially during dance sequences, you'll see the characters just so perfectly synchronized that it lacks personality, and it just feels like, okay, so they just had this dance animation ready to go and they just copied and pasted on each of the characters. That stuff sucks. But I can't deny that the animation is fine for what it's worth. Nothing of it is really all that painful to sit through. Like, it's just one of those things where it's like, if a kid enjoys this, I can't say I don't get it. A lot of kids are not going to be too deep into their knowledge of, like, how the Smurfs are or just entertainment in general. So some of these jokes that are pretty tired and old to you are going to seem new to those kids. Granted, it didn't make much money at the box office. It wasn't a total flop like some people wanted to say, but it did pretty bad, all things considered. So I imagine that kids weren't too crazy about it, but if they are, I don't know, again, I'm like, I've seen worse things. Like, it's not anything where it's like, okay, it's giving an insulting message or where the jokes become offensive or annoying. It's just more or less just tired and generic and boring. I was just bored more often than I was really all that mad about it. The only thing that made me mad is just as a fan, I don't want to say I'm too hard of a fan for the Smurfs. It's something that I watched as a kid, but I'm not crazy for it like I am for superheroes or the Looney Tunes or whatever. But, it's something that I liked as a kid. From that perspective, like, knowing some of these things, I'm just like, yeah, this is kind of insulting, but I don't know. Again, if you got a kid and they're into it, I can't say it's the worst time, but you're going to be bored and you'd rather they watch something else like Bluey, maybe. My bigger thing going into it is just more of an, on the whole, why is Hollywood constantly doing this? And I know the answer is because of money. Obviously, it's going to be because of the money. They probably, like, as much as this movie probably lost money for them, they probably made money through merchandise and whatnot. Point being is that they probably do make money in other ways just by doing this. I mean, it's the same with Disney, where whenever they release like a new Pooh cartoon or Pooh movie, Winnie the Pooh merchandise probably like skyrockets for them, and that's why they do it every now and then. It is one of those things where it's like, for compared to like a lot of other franchises that have had multiple iterations, like even if they haven't had a good iteration, like like something like Dr. Seuss, like a lot of those movies are just bad. You can at least get the idea of like, okay, well, they're doing something new or different with this or that adaptation. With this one, it's like, okay, the live action Smurfs movies, yeah, just to break it down, the live action Smurfs movies, there was two of them, a group of Smurfs that were making pop culture references. They went into the live action world. You had a singer voice Smurfette, and there was a whole plot line about Smurfette feeling like she doesn't belong because she was created by Gargamel in canon. So she's pretty much like, oh, okay, I'm the outsider Smurf or whatever. Whatever. Dumb movie. Don't need to dwell on it. I could barely remember the whole thing as, I'm not going to be here to review it, but it's not a good movie. Both of them are not good movies. Then you go over to the next attempt, The Lost Village. After these two live action movies, they had a fully animated Smurfs movie, also under Sony. And in this case, like, okay, let's make them closer to the designs of the cartoon. And I think animation-wise, this is the better looking one just because it's fully animated. And even though the designs are still a little off from being a perfect 2D recreation, they at least look better and more consistent and lively. That one is pretty much like, okay, well, here's Smurfette, once again voiced by a singer. This time David Lovato. The last time it was Katy Perry. In this case, Smurfette feels like she's an outsider again, and she discovers that there's this village that are filled with other Smurfs that are like her. In other words, women. That's the whole plot line. I can barely remember this one. I remember not really liking it, but thinking like, okay, it's a step up from those movies just because it's at least more tolerable, but it feels more like a TV special, and it's just forgettable. I barely can remember it. It's probably the one I remember the least of these movies, just because I did not watch it again recently, and while there are things that I remember at least kind of enjoying, I was just on the whole, this is a very forgettable movie, and the fact that I can't even tell you the full details kind of cements that. And then we get to this new one, which is once again the Smurfs go into live action world, though this time they don't have like a Neil Patrick Harris. Smurfette is once again voiced by a singer. In this case, it's Rihanna. Once again, there's a whole subplot regarding her being the creation of Gargamel. Now, granted, this time she's more secure about it. She's like accepted it until like around the third act where they try to play a whole, oh, this was all planned all along, and you were for some reason the one that was doing this unintentionally, but you're really the evil one or something like that. And it's like, what the fuck are we doing here? No one gives a shit. Like, look, making your movies feature Smurfette heavily would be kind of forgivable. I don't really care. I mean, she is one of the more known Smurfs for obvious reasons, but having them all focus to some extent the idea that she is, the creation of Gargamel, and going through that, it's like, dude, I don't care. Do something else. And this one was kind of right at first, by just having to be like, okay, yeah, that was a problem, but I've moved on. But then they decided to get back to that, and I'm like, why do we keep on doing this? Like, why are we doing, like, why are four movies and we have repeating threads that don't feel any less generic? Like, like people have said this like about Superman, for example, where there's multiple movies where Lex Luthor is the villain, and like that there's like some kind of real estate plan or whatever. If you think that's annoying and generic, watch the Smurfs movies. They are so much more generic and annoying about these things. It's like, just tell me a story about the Smurfs going on an adventure for a magical item, and you're good to go. And that's where this movie kind of was heading into the right direction, because it's like, okay, there's a magical book. They kind of do like the Infinity Gauntlet thing, like, from the Avengers, where it's like, oh, there's multiple books, and the wizards want them all together to rule over whatever. The villain of the movie, Gargamel's brother, is trying to get him or whatever. I don't fucking care. You're kind of doing something where I'm like, okay, this is kind of the right direction, but you should have kept it grounded to the Smurfs reality. You should have had it just be like, okay, here's another fantasy village, here's some fantasy characters. Don't include anything about space. Don't include anything about the real world. Don't include anything about the multiverse. There was no reason to even get to the multiverse. And this probably would have been a halfway decent movie. But as a result of doing that, and the fact that I'm like, look, we're still doing this stuff that we've already done, I kind of feel like this is the worst one of the Smurfs movies, by virtue of like, look, we're 4 movies in and we're repeating this stuff. Like the first 2 Smurfs movies were very annoying, and they're probably more annoying than this one. But at the very least, I could say that, Hank Azaria's Gargamel, he's fully committed in the role. It's honestly the best performance in any of these. So I'm just like, look, that's the one thing those 2 movies have going for it. And at the very least, it's like, well, they're at least upfront with what they're being. Lost Village is the best one of these, but only because it at least keeps the Smurfs in Smurf world. But it's also the most forgettable one, so that hurts it a lot. But at the very least, I don't remember it pissing me off. It was just more or less just boring and forgettable. Like I said, it feels like a TV special. And then you got this one where it's like, okay, it doesn't really piss me off, that much, especially, for something that I was expecting to piss me off. But I do end up feeling like I don't know what we're doing in this franchise at this point anymore. We're repeating stuff. We're doing the same thing. At the very least, Gargamel is, like, voice acting wise, a step up from The Lost Village. That's the one thing that I will say The Lost Village gets incredibly wrong. They have Rainn Wilson as Gargamel in that one. Doesn't work. It just does not work. Rainn Wilson he's done some voice work before, but he just does not sound right in the Gargamel role. In this one, it's like, okay, so, you got a guy who could do it decently, but it's, again, ruined by the fact that you make Gargamel into a complete idiot and not even the main villain, which, look, I wouldn't have even minded, but again, you decided to introduce a character that is basically Gargamel and just put Gargamel as an idiot. It's like, that's just insulting. Again, what makes it feel like the worst is the fact that it's like, we're doing all this stuff again, and even though it's not as annoying as the 2011 ones, it just feels more insulting because it feels like they were actually trying to be a little closer to what the Smurfs should be. So in that, it's like, yeah, to me, it's the worst one. It may not be the one that gets me the most angry, but it is the one that I feel like you put so little effort on. I don't know who exactly was this movie supposed to be for, other than just like, look, we're using an IP that you guys know and recognize and just going for it. It's tiresome, It's like, why are we doing this? Like, if we're gonna be doing Smurfs movies, if you're gonna be doing movies based on this franchise, why is it that this is the third attempt at doing a new version of this for the big screen, the fourth movie in, and you still miss the whole point of these characters? Like, this isn't, for example, like the Addams Family, which I feel has strayed so far from the classic comics, where it's like, okay, newer iterations skip over the stuff from the comics and even the original series, but at the very least, they still get the idea across of what these characters are. I can't say that for the Smurfs. It's like, it's still doing jokes about like, oh, isn't it funny that they're always saying Smurf this or Smurf that? It's like, I don't know, man. It's just tiring, and Hollywood has really got to stop using these characters if they're not even going to make a sincere attempt at doing their lore. It's like, look, I'm not even asking you to make it good. Like, whatever. Like, I'm not even the biggest fan of the Smurfs to begin with. It is something that I remember watching the cartoon, but it's not something that I'm married to where I'm like, yeah, it has to be the perfect Smurfs adaptation. And like, look, just give me a decent one and I'll probably be fine. But no, they can't even clear that bar, and it's just gotten really annoying. But Smurfs 2025, worst movie of the year, but at the same time, not the worst thing I've ever seen. But again, there's just really no reason for Hollywood to keep on doing this franchise if they're not even going to try to do it right, and if they're just going to be repeating the same formula of like musician-esque Smurfette's backstory, whatever else. I just don't care. So there you go. There's a very negative episode of I Can't Believe It's Not the Mouse. Probably not one of my better episodes just because I'm really just ranting here, but I had to get that out of my system. In any case, thank you for listening, and I hope to see you again next time.
Oh no, I can only run from left to right.
Thanks for stopping by. Go ahead and follow this channel. Subscribe, like and comment, ring the bell for notifications. Go ahead and also follow my podcast and give some love to my Patreon account while you're at it. It's www.patreon.com/psycams. Again, thanks for stopping by, and I hope you come back for more in the future.